Hey quilty friends, welcome to our Thursday fun video. I'm excited to be here again today and I hope that you're just as excited as I am. So if you haven't joined me in one of these fun Thursday videos, it's kind of my thing on Thursdays just to have a little bit more fun. I've mentioned this a few other times in the Thursday videos, but with machine quilting, with sewing, with all of this, things can get so serious and so kind of frustrating sometimes that there is a fun side to quilting. Most of us got into this because we have a hobby, and usually our hobbies are a place where we go for fun and to take our stresses out, not to add more stresses to our lives. So my Thursday videos are totally intended for that. Yeah, you'll probably, hopefully, learn a little bit from them, but they're meant to be fun. They're kind of meant to be a little bit more playful. And if you've been around for a while, you've seen that sometimes we make funny videos. Sometimes we include my kids. Sometimes my husband's here with us, but it's all just to bring out that light side in quilting. So with Thursday videos, I also do like to have fun giveaways. And this week's giveaway is going to be something exciting, and I'm excited to share it with you. How do you enter our giveaways? Well, all that we do is ask that you leave a comment and tell us, have you ever sent your quilt to a Longarm Quilter? And then we do ask that you share this video. I'll tell you in just a little bit what this week's giveaway is going to be, so hang tight. Okay, so in the meantime, why are we here today? Well, as you probably know, besides writing books and creating rulers and all this other crazy stuff that I'm doing, I do genuinely love to machine quilt quilts. And most often I am machine quilting client quilts for customers all around the world that are sending them to me, and I'm quilting them for them. So over on my Patreon page and a lot of times on YouTube, I'll show little sneak peeks of actual client quilts, which is fun for me. I feel like it's still, by quilting client quilts, I'm pushing myself my own creativity. They're not necessarily all quilts that I would have pieced, but I love being pushed out of my box and pushed to quilt things that are just different and fun. And I don't know, there's just something exciting about it to me. So with all of these quilts, I've been doing this quilting for clients for just over 12 years now, and I've kind of seen it all. Now, when I go into this video, I just want to tell you that I am not a perfect piecer. So when I get a client quilt, I'm not at all ever judging anybody's work, because don't look close at anything I make. I feel like I can quilt really great, but my piecing isn't always perfect, and I'm okay with that. That's why I will never judge your quilt. Trust me. So today I thought I would share 10 things that you can do if you are sending your quilt to a Longarm Quilter to be quilted that may help your process. It may help everything just go a little bit more smoothly. But I do have to let you know, these are just a few things that I have found to be helpful and some things that I think are important. Before you do send your quilt off to your Longarm Quilter, make sure you talk with your quilter and ask them, do I need my backing to be a certain size? Do I have something in mind that I want my quilter to do? Communication really is the very first key, even though I'm not really counting it as step number one, but really communication with your quilter is what will be the very best thing you can do to get really great results. Okay, so what are 10 things that I recommend that you should do before sending your quilt to a Longarm Quilter? Number one, mark your top on your quilt top and your quilt backing. What does that mean? Why would I mark my top on my quilt and my quilt backing? And how would I do that? Well, I have found the easiest thing that you can do is even use just a scrap piece of fabric, like a small 2-inch square of fabric. Right on that fabric top, then use a safety pin and pin that to the top of your quilt. Then do the same thing on the backing. Now, why do I say to use a piece of fabric versus a Post-it or a sticky note, whatever? Why do I say that? Well, quilts are getting mailed to me. They're going in boxes. Sometimes crazy things can happen in boxes. I've had occasion where the paper will actually rip off of the quilt when I'm opening it or somehow during the whole process, whereas a piece of fabric is not going to rip off as easily as a piece of paper. Now, with that being said, obviously the pin would stay in the quilt, so it's probably going to be okay, but sometimes a piece of fabric just works a little bit easier, and I'm betting most of us have some small scrap of fabric that we could attach there. So why do I ask that you mark those? Well, maybe to you, the quilt top is very obviously directional. You can very obviously see what's the top and what's the bottom. The backing, the same, is really obvious to you. For me personally, I see a lot of quilts, and what I think is the top on all quilts might not always be the exact same that you think is the top of the quilt. So by marking those on the quilt top and the quilt backing, as a quilter, I can make sure that I'm lining up what you want to be the top on the quilt top and the quilt backing perfectly, so it's not anything ski-wampus happening through the machine quilting process. Something, hopefully, that will just help make the process a little easier. Number 2, stay stitches. Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest. This is something that I had no idea about before I started machine quilting. I had never done stay stitching on a quilt. I'd never even seen stay stitching. I was totally oblivious to this. So if you don't know what it is, don't feel like you're missing out. But it's something that I have really learned to love with machine quilting. So after you're done piecing your whole entire quilt top, if it has borders on it, no matter what the quilt top has on it, take a small seam about 1/8 inch from the outside of the quilt top all the way around the quilt. By doing this, even with a piece border, a solid border, whatever it is, those stay stitches, first of all, they help hold your seams together. Even if you've done back stitching around all of your seams, sometimes the seams will just get a little bit of stretch in them, a little bit of distortion, kind of funny things can happen there. So by doing that stay stitch all the way around the outside, you're going to end up with a little bit more square quilt. So something simple, takes just a few extra minutes and will really help you have great results long run. Number 3, okay, make your backing square or rectangle, just something. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times what happens with piecing a quilt top, and I have done this myself without knowing that this was not the greatest way to piece the quilt backing. So I piece my quilt top. Let's say it's a 60-inch by 60-inch square, and I've got 4 yards of backing for this. So I chop my fabric in half, sew the 2 pieces together, press it, trim off the selvage, ready to quilt, right? Okay, so what happens when I do that? Generally, what happens, even if I've measured those 2 pieces for my backing, cut it in half, sewed it together, one of them ends up being a little bit longer than the other. I need to make sure that those 2 pieces are the exact same length. I don't want to have part of my quilt top or my quilt backing be this long and another piece that's this long. Why? What does it matter? When I quilted it at home on my frame, that's totally fine. It doesn't matter how big the quilt backing is or necessarily if it is square. Well, when we're attaching it to our long arm machine here, we're attaching it to leaders. And when we're attaching it to those leaders, we're either pin basting, we're using like the red snappers, we're using some type of a system to attach that to our long arm quilting machine. And we need a nice straight line. So you need to make sure that those pieces are all the same all the way around, especially when you've pieced that backing. If it has seams in it, make sure that that quilt backing is as square as you can make it. All right, number 4, make sure that your quilt backing is larger than your quilt top. So what does that mean? Why does my quilt top need to be larger than my top? You know, when I've tied quilts, when I've done quilting on a domestic machine, it doesn't necessarily always have to be larger. Why does it need to be larger? Well, again, going back to working on a long arm machine, it's a different process than loading a quilt on quilting frames for hand quilting or for tying or even for domestic quilting. It is a little bit different working with a long arm machine. So why is it different? Well, not only, like I mentioned in the last step, not only are we attaching it to those leaders, but when we're attaching it to those leaders, it's taking up a little space across the bottom of the backing and a little bit of space across the top. Then you have to take into consideration that the quilt tops, because there's generally more seams in a quilt top, and even though we're trying not to pull too tight on your quilt tops, and I'm trying my hardest not to distort anything, things can happen where your quilt tops can actually stretch a little bit. There's more seams in them. So by having that extra space there as I work my way down the quilt, we know for sure that the quilt top will always be smaller than the quilt backing. Also, along the sides of the quilt, we, as a long arm quilter, we're attaching clamps to the side to help hold everything out nice and flat. So we don't want to attach those clamps right to your quilt top, because then we couldn't quilt to the edge of your quilt top. We need a space to be able to attach those, but then we don't want it so close that our machine is running into those clamps or something funny like that. I ask my clients to make their quilt tops at least 4 inches larger on all 4 sides than the quilt top. Okay, next, make your batting also larger than your quilt top. So my personal rule of thumb, I just make my batting about the same size as my quilt backing. And again, why do I do this? Well, it's basically all the same reasons that I just mentioned in keeping your backing larger than your quilt top. By making your batting larger, the same thing. I don't have to worry about, is it going to be big enough when I get to the end? I know that it's going to be wide enough. It's just a few extra inches, totally worth the final result. All right, next thing that you can do to help keep your long arm quilter happy. Press your quilt top and your quilt backing before you send it, before you deliver it, whatever. Press those seams. You know, there's different ways you can press. Everybody has their own opinion, their own thoughts as to if quilt seams should be pressed open or to the side or whatever. I'm not going to get into that today. Just make sure that they are pressed. And also on your backing, if there are any seams on that, just make sure those are pressed. It just helps. Well, overall, you're going to end up with a better result, but it also just helps the process. Being a long arm quilter, it helps us move our machines over everything nicely, helps things lay nice and flat. Next thing you should do to help keep your long arm quilter happy, even no matter what type of a backing you're using on your quilt top, there are obviously times when you're using just one large piece of fabric. You know, if you have like 108 or a smaller fabric or a smaller top, like a baby quilt, sometimes we aren't always piecing our quilt backs. But if it is a quilt back that's going to be pieced, don't just go by the yardage and then send that along with your quilt top to your quilter. Make sure that you do piece your quilt backing, press it before sending it to your long arm quilter. All right, so the next one, I think this one's really helpful. Obviously, everybody might have their own opinions about it, but come up with a plan. And what does that mean? Why would I come up with a plan? That's why I go to a long arm quilter. Well, when I say come up with a plan, I mean, think about it. Do you want something that's an edge-to-edge design on your quilt, or maybe something more custom? So what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes we're going to use either pantograph patterns or computerized quilting and quilt a design completely across a quilt with no regard to borders, piecing, anything like that. It's just one design across the whole quilt. This is something that's great for quilts that are going to be used a lot, they're going to be washed a lot. It's just a really great way to quilt a quilt. So decide if that's something you want quilted, or if you want to go the route where it's more custom, it's enhancing what's going on, it's adding custom quilting lines to it. Most of the time, it's on a particular design on a block, a particular design in the borders, different things like that. That's what custom quilting is. So think about that. Maybe if there's pictures of things you've seen that you like before, different ways to quilt your quilt that you like. But along with that, something that I really, really hope that you'll take away from this video today, and, you know, remember on your own quilts, most of us as long arm quilters, we love quilting for you. First of all, don't let me ever make you feel like we don't, but we love quilting for you. But sometimes we do also have a little bit of creativity, and if you'll let us use a little bit of our own creativity, we might be able to enhance your quilt even more. So maybe suggest designs, say, I like these swirls, maybe we could do something similar to this. It's hard as a machine quilter to have a client bring you a quilt and say, I want it quilted exactly like this quilt. For me personally, I don't necessarily have a problem with that because I know there's awesome quilters, and I know sometimes you guys want quilts quilted exactly how I've quilted other ones. But if you say maybe something similar, it gives the quilter a little bit of creative control. Maybe if it's a design that's going to be a computerized edge-to-edge design, maybe that quilter does not have that design, but they have something similar. Or custom quilting, maybe it's something that your quilter's uncomfortable with, or something that won't even work on a long arm. You know, I've seen some designs that are really, really fabulous, but they've been quilted on a domestic machine, and the way it's quilted is really, really difficult to do on a Longarm machine. So talk with your quilter. Again, this all goes back to communication with your machine quilter. The best thing really that you can do is communicate about your designs, and do allow each other, your quilter and yourself, to have a little bit of creative let go, I should say, and have fun with it, play with it. All right, last little tip I've shared, or I have for you today. Obviously, I could go on for a long time and share lots of little tips and hints and things that hopefully will help you, but I hope this little list today just maybe helps. Maybe you can take one thing from it and find a little bit of inspiration there. The last thing I do want to say is, don't ever baste your own quilt top if you are sending it to a Longarm quilter. So I have had times when, and nothing wrong with this, the client obviously had no idea not to do anything different, but where quilts have been brought to me that were already beautifully basted with pins or thread or different things like that, the quilt top to the batting, ready to quilt on a domestic machine or on the frames. But the way that we're loading our quilts on our Longarm machines, they actually need to be in 3 separate pieces. We need our backing as one piece, we need our batting as one piece, and we need the quilt top as one piece. Do not attach them all together, because then we just have to take it all apart to put it back on the Longarm quilting machine. So those are my tips for today. I hope that you're all able to find a little bit of inspiration from those. But what about the giveaway? I almost forgot. Not really. Okay, so today I am excited. My brand new book is coming out this month. We are in August. My brand new book, Visual Guide to Creative Straight Line Quilting, Professional Results on Any Machine, is shipping this month. You can pre-order on my website, peaceandquilt.com, or in your local quilt shop. You can pick it up wherever it's available online. My brand new book is shipping this month, and I am giving away a copy of that today. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, just leave a comment and tell us, have you ever sent your quilt off to a Longarm quilter to be quilted? And then we just ask that you share this video. We leave our giveaways open for about 24 hours, so we will announce the giveaway winner tomorrow. Thanks everybody for joining me. Make sure you stop over by my YouTube channel every day over there for 365 days. I am sharing a brand new how-to machine quilt with machine quilting rulers video tutorial. Plus we share lots more videos over there. So make sure you check it out and have a great day, everybody. See ya.